Okay, and welcome back to our Positivity Bio class, chapter 20. Talking about setbacks or actually springboard, and the distinctions between the two. And I want to share a story. There's a gentleman that some of you may actually know, but he is he's a recently retired Air Force, and he began as a missileer. He began his Air Force career as a missileer, and he was stationed in Minot, North Dakota.
Ugh.
Now, for those of you who've never been to Minot, you didn't miss anything.
Yeah.
Minot, North Dakota is the middle of nowhere, and it's freezing, and there's nothing to do, and it's all boring as all get out. And so this young man, his name is Michael. So Michael went out to Minot as a missileer and was bored silly, and so far away from anything Jewish that it started to nag at him, and he started to learn more Torah and find online sources for learning Torah.
Mhm.
And one thing led to another. As we say, mitzvahs are like a train. One mitzvah leads to another mitzvah. And one thing to another. And when he finished his stint at Minot, and he finished his job as a missileer, he actually left the Air Force and went and got his rabbinical ordination, his smicha, and he came back to the Air Force as an Air Force chaplain.
Mhm.
And served for over a dozen years as an Air Force chaplain. And I only recently retired. And I use that example because it was the emptiness of Minot and being so far away from anything remotely Jewish that pushed him to learn more and do more.
Is that the positive spin? That's the positive spin.
Well, see, that's the interesting thing, and what I want to talk about tonight is that we often talk about, that adversity makes a person stronger and makes them better, having gone through adversity, and that's the whole hero, the hero's journey concept, right? It makes it better, but the idea really is that if everything comes from God, nothing happens outside of God, and if God wants only what's good for his creations, then whatever the setback is, whatever the challenge is, that's actually a divine spark of purpose. There's something in that has a good purpose to it, and the goal is a better outcome. That's the actual intent. So it's not that, if you have lemons, make lemonade. It's more about the initial intention was the lemonade.
Mm-hmm.
So having the mindset that everything that comes to us is for our benefit, is good. That's the concept, right? And the Rebbe explains this in an oftentimes concept of a yerida l'tzorach aliyah, a descent for the purpose of an ascent. And there was someone who came to the Rebbe's office, and this was and the Rebbe was explaining. This was a young man. Actually, he's from Chicago. Mendel Greenbaum. Mendel Greenbaum had come, and what had happened was that he had come from a very secular background. He had made decisions to go to yeshiva. He went to Brooklyn, New York, and entered the yeshiva in Brooklyn. And short months after that, he got his draft noticed. And he was upset because, like, all the time I wasted before, I had no responsibilities, and time was wasted. Now, when I've got something to do, constructive to do, I'm really engaged in doing, and it's all about Torah mitzvahs, sitting and studying yeshiva, and all of a sudden now I get a draft call. Like, that's not fair, right? And the Rebbe explained to him The concept of Yerida L'Tzarech Aliyah, a descent for the purpose of an Aliyah. And he said very simply, if you stand in front of a chair and you want to try and jump over the chair, you can't jump over the chair. But if you back up a bit and get a bit of a running start, then you can jump over the chair.
And break your neck in the process.
Also for the good somehow.
It is good because then the sports medicine doctor gets a business.
So there has to be the good for the individual itself, right? It has to be not just good for the people who are going to benefit. Like one of my sons has a sticker. My boys are EMTs as well, and one of them has a sticker. He says, "It's not that I want you to get hurt, but when you do, I want to be there."
Yeah.
I studied for this. I learned for this. I practiced for this. And by the way, the guy that was the Miss Hillary in Minot, he was there on 9/11.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And keys were inserted and they were waiting instructions. And there's this sense of, God forbid, but like I learned all this stuff, I want to use it, right? For a legitimate reason, right? But God forbid, right? But again, the idea is that whatever adversities we come upon, it's for our benefit. It's really to build us up. There's an interesting concept on regarding Shabbos, what we can do and we cannot do, right? And you can't do destructive things just to be destructive. But if what you're doing is destroying in order to build up, that's a different article. Again, not on Shabbos, but for example, you can't build on Shabbos, right? But there's a question about, can you tear down a synagogue? You can't tear down a synagogue.
Mhm.
But can you tear down a synagogue in order to build a bigger synagogue or a more beautiful synagogue? Then yes, because the destruction is for the purpose of building as well. So the negatives for the purpose of the positive. And when it comes to that and we see it, then it's actually a constructive thing. So the one on Shabbos is this Shabbos? Oh, I think this is not really the Shabbos. Breaking dishes is destructive. But if doing so is to quell the anger, then it's constructive.
Dude,
Oh,
You
no.
talk about water.
Bob, I didn't hear what you said.
Tried it, it didn't
I
help.
said, and you talk about lawyers.
Yeah, yeah. I now
Talk
feel in
about
danger. I
mental
now feel in
gymnastics.
danger.
But again, the idea then is that sometimes the destructive things are for a constructive purpose. And so that's the same concept of Yerida L'Tzarech Aliyah, a descent for the purpose of an ascent, right? And coming from that perspective, then whatever happens to us that may seem negative and troubling, if we see it from the perspective of somehow this is all for my good. Now, there has been an old Jewish saying of Zazayna Kapara, let this be a sacrifice, right? If something bad had to happen, then that which has just happened that's bad, let that suffice for it. Let that be the sacrifice, right? So when an accident happens or something breaks or something like that, we say Zalzaina Kapara, let that be the sacrifice and nothing worse should happen, right? But that's not what we're really talking about. What we're talking about is that there is an intrinsic good, an essential good in that thing which feels so negative. So this Bacher, this young Bacher, he had left Chicago, gone to New York, now he gets drafted. And so he's feeling really bad about the fact that, what's happened here, right? But the Rebbe explained to him that setbacks are always inherently good for us somehow, and gave him a blessing for success in his endeavors. And it turns out that while he was in service, it's not easy to put on tefillin every day. It's not easy to keep kosher when you're in the service. All those things are big challenges, right? But because he worked at it, that strengthened his commitment to those things much more than it would he'd been in Brooklyn. If you're living in Brooklyn, kosher is available, everything is there, go to shul, there's lots of minyanim, it's all there, right? All of a sudden, it wasn't there. That made it even harder, which made it more precious to him. And in fact, not only did he do it for himself, but he also started becoming a lay leader, helping other people put on tefillin, having other people keep kosher. And in that sense, it went from just taking care of himself to now being a leader of others and helping support their Yiddishkeit as well. So he thought of it initially as a yerida, a descent, but truly it was for an ascent to not only strengthen himself, but be able to become a leader of others as well. So the biggest example of this is Gullus, exile. We've been in exile. This last exile, this Roman exile, has been over 2,400 years of exile. And we have gone through one horrific thing after another in all of these centuries. And yet, we got scattered across the globe. Well, that's devastating for any people. But because we got scattered across the globe, we were actually able to make influences and inroads in all kinds of foreign countries that we may never have come to before. And we may not have gone to on our own. But because we got scattered to the farthest corners, all of a sudden, we had an impact in changing the world. So this was brought up to the Rebbe, and through the Rebbe spoke about this at a Farbrengen regarding this idea of Yerida L'Tzarech Aliyah, descent for the purpose of an ascent, that yes, it is recognized that exile was part of our consequences for not following Torah mitzvahs and getting scattered across the globe and having challenging times. But those challenging times made us even stronger and gave us an opportunity to influence the world, a powerful influence across all parts of the world. And so, in that sense, what began as a consequence, a negative consequence, at least in appearance, became much more an opportunity to spread out. In Chassidus, we talk about that in the creation of the world, Shviras HaKelim, the breaking of the vessels. The concept is that, you know, if the water is too hot or too cold, it can shatter the glass, right? If the energy is too powerful, it'll break. It'll close the breaker. The infinite aspect of the God's infinite world, God's infinite powers, when creating a finite world, there was a shviras hakelim, a breaking of the vessels, where godly sparks were scattered all over the world. Our job has been to go gather the sparks, to go out into the world and find places to do Torah and mitzvahs and elevate the world to holiness throughout all the different corners. If we had been home in our land in Israel, each of those journeys would have been with much challenge and travail, and who would want to go? But the fact that we all got scattered means that we've all gone to the farthest corners of the world, and there we have continued to fulfill Torah and mitzvahs and elevate the sparks of the world to tikkun olam, to bringing the world back to being fixed. But that means elevating all the darkest corners of the world. So we could focus on it came about through a punishment, but ultimately that too was for the good. And there's this fine line we have to look at, because we could say that every sin is a yerida, a descent, for the sake of an ascent. Because every time we sin against God, we push ourselves away from God, it creates a longing and a desire for reconnecting. And you know, like a slingshot, the farther back you pull it, the more power it has coming forward. So the same thing, the more distant we feel from God, the more powerful is that longing to be close again. So if you can't sin without God letting us sin, so God is complicit every time we sin, and in that sense, the opportunity is for us to grow and do better. I smile with this idea because I have a picture. I had a video clip on our family WhatsApp today. You know those things where you put it's like an ice cream maker, and it revolves around, and in that revolving, it kind of spins the cream to make ice cream, right? A couple of toddlers got a hold of one of those and plugged it in, and they were sitting on top of it, taking turns, pushing the button and getting rides. And
Little
God,
kids.
my daughter saw the humor in that and took a video clip of it, not reprimanding them, but rather she saw the humor, took a video clip, and she shared it with the family, right? So it was really cute. But the idea of Yerida L'Tzarech Aliyah is that the farther we go away, the more powerful is the longing to return. God allows us to sin, not for the sin, but for the consequence that comes afterwards, for the knowledge that it's going to bring us closer back. There'll be this powerful move to come back to God. So, therefore, when going back, look at world history, look at Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve. The very first sin was eating of the tree of good and evil, and God had said, don't eat from that tree, right? And then of course they did, right? But in a sense, that led to all of the opportunities that came up afterwards to draw closer to God. So in Chassidus, there's this concept of that conversation that went on back and forth between Adam and Chava and Adam and Eve, and the depth of Adam wants to just do what we're told, right? But Chava is able to see more can be accomplished by not following the rule, getting in trouble, getting sent out of Gan Eden, and then accomplishing more and choosing that route to go. So obviously you have to always be careful. It's a slippery slope. You cannot choose to do evil in order to then use that as an impetus to go better, right? It doesn't work that way. We say that if someone says, I'm going to sin and then repent, then God doesn't give them the chance of repenting, right? So we can't use that as the excuse. But if God is giving us a Yetzer Hara, and that Yetzer Hara, that evil inclination, then takes us down a sultry path, that too has God's acceptance, if not blessings, at least because of the intent of that greater good can come from it, right? So that's the idea of Yerida L'Tzarech Aliyah. And we talk about this in the sense of positivity bias, because if we can see that, then every descent is for the purpose of an ascent. Everything that may look negative or bad can actually be fulfilling something even greater. And one of the examples that I'll show here in the books is there was a time, it was 1977. It was on Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah is a time we're supposed to be rejoicing and celebrating. And the Rebbe had a massive cardiac arrest. And the shul was emptied out immediately, and Hatzalah came in, and medical services actually came to the Rebbe, were brought into the Rebbe, so they They set up a hospital room inside his office with all the equipment necessary. And but in the immediate time, Hasidim were terrified. And it was a horrific thing. I mean, Simchas Torah is not a happy time when like this goes on, right? And the Rebbe, when the doctor was drawing blood, the Rebbe asked him, what happens when the blood is being drawn? Is the blood pushing itself into the tube, or is it the vacuum in the tube that allows the blood to go in? And the doctor explained that that's the vacuum, right? And so the Rebbe sent a message back to the Hasidim using this example of, we would have a joyous Simchas Torah. Now there's something that has come in the way to dampen our exuberance in the holiday that's created this vacuum. And now's an opportunity to be even more exuberant than we would have before. And that's how we have to fill that vacuum, is with greater joy and greater excitement and greater connection with God in the midst of the holiday. And I say we're facing that same thing this year, in the sense that, October 7th is coming up. The secular calendar looks at October 7th, but for us, that was Simchas Torah.
Yeah.
How do we celebrate this Simchas Torah? Well, it's a biblical command. So we now have a vacuum that gives us this sense of mourning, but that has to be filled with the joy of the holiday. We have to be happier now on Simchas Torah than we ever have before, because it's our responsibility to fill that void, to turn this horrific thing over and add more light to the world, bring more joy to the world. So it's a challenge. It's a difficult challenge. It's even a painful challenge. But that's the challenge, is to use every setback as a springboard. That springboard, that going down is to push us even higher, right? So every time some darkness comes in the world, we have to add more light. Our response is not, we have to do the mourning that's necessary, and we have to honor the human emotions and things. But our job is not to sulk. Our job is to fill the space with greater joy and greater devotion. There are a number of people I know that on October 8th of last year, they put on a yarmulke. They hadn't been wearing for years, and they put on a yarmulke. And they did it. The quote is, no, I forget now the quote. It's not stubborn. There's another word for it there. But stubborn, a stubborn Jew, right? And again, the idea is that take care of the idea. And Lashana Tova, exactly.
Same to you.
So the goal is, Jeff, you too, take care. The goal is to fill the void and to make it even more powerful. That's the goal. And so the descent has to be for the purpose of an ascent. The void has to be filled with greater light. And so every time we meet more darkness, the intention is that we have to step up to the occasion and add more light every time. And so this idea is, again, the idea of that a tragedy is a prelude to redemption. That the challenges, the negativity, all of that is an opportunity to actually step up in a much greater way than ever before. Questions, insights?
I have something.
Yes.
We had a funeral director, Jewish funeral director, who was a pillar in the community for many, many years. And he just passed away at the age of 93. And the day before his funeral, his granddaughter was married.
Oh,
But in the obituary, it said that he was a man who did not ever want anyone to be sad. So they celebrated his life with the
right.
wedding, which was a little odd for all of us. I mean, I would have canceled my wedding. I'm not that kind of a person.
But canceling the wedding or postponing the wedding, um, yeah, we can go that route, but in this sense, it was, part of adding celebration to his life, right?
Mhm.
So it's being able to pick up the pieces. We will remember there was a story we talked about previously where a family had purchased a new Sefer Torah to donate to the synagogue, and they were making a big party at their house, and they were finishing the last words of the Torah, and then they would have a big party celebration. They would march with the Torah to the synagogue. The other Torahs from the synagogue would come outside and join, and there'd be singing and dancing, part of like Simchas Torah, outside the synagogue, and then they would go in, and the dancing would continue inside the synagogue. And this was the event that was planned, right? At the house, one of the single members of the community had a coronary and died in the house at the celebration. And the hostess wrote to the Rebbe, how could God allow this horrific event? Here I am trying to do something good for the community. Here I am trying to lift up the community and raise up the community. How can God let such a horrific thing happen in my house?
Mm-hmm.
And the Rebbe was empathetic and hearing her out. But then he also added, perhaps there might be another side to think of. Here's a person who lives alone, and who knows how long she could have been there without anyone noticing. Here, it was noticed immediately. And maybe rather than having died alone, here she was surrounded by friends and community.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, her soul passed from this life in the midst of a celebration of the Torah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what a way to go, right? So we could focus on the negative side, but we could also find the positive things in light of all that as well. And
Mm-hmm.
so part of our challenge is to add more light. I remember when there was the massacre in Mumbai, and the Chabad rabbi and his wife were killed, and it was a terrorist attack in the Chabad house, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Chabad response was not to shut down the Chabad house, but to expand it. Where there's darkness, we have to add more light.
Mm-hmm.
And so that always has to be our response. The Jewish response has to always be that with every Yerida, every descent is an ascent, and that the intention of the Yerida is the ascent, is the comeback stronger. Just again, like the slingshot, right? Pulling back. That has to be the essence of what it's about every time. So we always have to find a way to rebound and to, as you said, someone else might, in that kind of circumstance, someone else might have postponed the wedding, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that would be potentially giving in to the sadness. Maybe it has to be the opposite. And for that family, that's exactly what they did.
Right.
But it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
It will be hard to dance on Simchas Torah a year after the massacres in Israel. But the more light we bring into the environment, the more joy we bring into the world, the faster Mashiach can come, and it changes everything. It's a total game changer. And so that becomes our mission, is to change the world and change for good.